Transformers 1 is the most safe, predictable movie I've watched in a long time. It's an animated Marvel film, a bright, chrome, colourful theme park ride full of cliched lines and badly timed jokes. You have a good idea what's going to happen before you see the film. It happens pretty much as you'd expect it to, and even when it does deviate from that, it does it in a pretty ham-fisted way. It's a shame too, because Transformers 1 is the first theatrical animated Transformers film in 38 years. A lot of good people worked on it. Josh Cooley, he wrote the story for Toy Story 4 and the script for Inside Out directed, and it has the voice work of Chris Hemsworth, Brian Tyree Henry, Scarlett Johansson, Steve Buscemi, Lawrence Fishburne, John Hamm. The problem is, when you play it as safe as this movie does, even with all the megastars in the world, it's hard to get past mediocre. Transformers 1 then tells the origin stories of both Optimus Prime and Megatron. It takes place on Cybertron, a planet full of sentient robots who exist on a dwindling resource called Energon, which they mine from underground. Orion Pax, voiced by Chris Hemsworth, and his friend D16, Brian Tyree Henry, work in the mines, but are fired at the start of the film after an accident, along with their supervisor Elita 1, voiced by Scarlett Johansson. Determined not to be cast aside as scrap, they enter a race organised by Cybertron hero and leader Sentinel Prime, voiced by John Hamm. Without giving too much away, the upshot of this sees them meeting B-127, voiced by Keegan-Michael Key, and travelling to Cybertron's surface in search of one of the lost original Prime robots. Bear with me here, there are a lot of nouns in this movie. Who's called Alpha Trion and is voiced by Lawrence Fishburne. What they learn from Alpha Trion changes everything they know about Cybertron and its problems. But can they use their newfound knowledge to fix their planet, or will they be led astray by their anger at what they found? I sometimes think that live-action movie stars don't always have what it takes to do voice work, sounding a bit quiet or dull, lacking expression. But for the most part, Hemsworth, Henry, Johansson and co do a good enough job here, even if the plasticky style of industrial magic and lights animation means there's little room for expression on the Transformers' faces. It probably helps that, because the film's more action rollercoaster than character-driven, 90% of their dialogue consists of grunting, growling and shouting. The plasticky animation in Transformers 1 is decent enough for the most part. Like the Marvel superhero films that are clearly the filmmaker's inspiration, it's bright, colourful and crisp. And to be honest, if all you're looking for in a movie this week is a fireworks feast for the eyes, you could do a lot worse. Unlike some of the better animated movies of the last few years, however, Into and Across the Spider-Verse spring to mind instantly, there's nothing that stands out about Transformers 1's visuals. Nothing unique, no style. It's animation for the Fortnite generation. And that's about where the semi-positives for Transformers 1 end, because in modelling this film on blockbusters, the filmmakers have saddled it with all the problems of those movies too. The biggest, as mentioned at the start of this review, is predictability. I understand that origin stories like Optimus Prime and Megatron's here naturally follow a familiar structure, but after a dozen superhero versions over the last 20 years, that structure is now as dull as dishwater. It isn't helped here by Transformers 1's dual protagonists, which mean that action movie screen time dedicated to character development, already short in duration, is halved again. Moments of change feel rushed, fallings out feel forced, and the film relies a lot on coincidence as to move the story forward. Like Marvel films too, Transformers 1 is chock full of quips and jokes. Some of them land and had me chuckling away, but plenty don't. What the humour absolutely does do though is mess with the movie's pacing and tension. Every time Transformers 1 builds up a little of either, a comic moment stampedes in like an elephant and breaks it all apart. I can kind of understand this at the start of the film, but when it's still happening in the climax, it just feels disjointed. Transformers 1 is full of cliched lines too, to the degree that you can often predict moments of dialogue before they're uttered. There's direct exposition galore, and half the characters seem to be addicted to voicing their feelings or plans aloud. It's all just so flat and boring and leaves you feeling like you're watching robots rather than characters, which I suppose, being fair, you are, just not in the way the writers intended. Apparently Chris Hemsworth signed himself up to this movie after being impressed with the screenplay. He must have seen something in it that I didn't. The music too felt like someone had taken the themes, flow and instrumentation from every Marvel and Star Wars film of the last 20 years, fed them into an AI generator and told it to do its worst. It's the most bland, uninspired advert for a mobile game sounding stuff, and I feel sorry for whichever creative had to do it. They must have been chewing their fingertips off in boredom. Maybe I'm speaking for myself here, but I'd like to think that most agree, even comic book movie fans, that films like Nolan's Batman's, Joker, Logan and the Spider-Verse films are the really good ones. The reason they're good is that those films are about characters. They take time to set up desire lines, lessons the characters need to learn, complex conflicts. Films like this one, Transformers 1, they do that too, but just in the most perfunctory way. The characters might as well be cardboard cutouts there to toss around in the colourful action scenes. When all of that blandness is decorated with generic animation, a predictable plot, cliched lines, vanilla music, what you end up with is a Josh Cooley film that won't even be remembered in 10 months, let alone 10 years. You can't say the same about his Inside Out. But there you go. I'm sure there are some mega Transformers fans out there who'll lap this up, but if you're just an average Joe looking for a movie to watch, I'd probably try something else instead. Anyway, nothing more to say. This is Movie Maverick signing out.